The desert had reached its limit, 117 degrees, no wind, no shade. The asphalt was boiling, but what really stopped the billionaire was what he saw on the shoulder, a barefoot boy, his feet raw and bleeding, carrying 3 lifeless babies in his arms. None of the 4 cried anymore, and that was the worst sign. Their silence screamed. When the billionaire ran toward them, he felt something he hadn't felt in decades, the fear of losing someone. He slammed on the brakes. The screech of melting tires wasn't as painful as the thud in his chest. It didn't. That makes sense. That road cut through an uninhabited desert between Nevada and California. No houses, no villages, just stone, heat, and miles of nothing. How were they even there? The boy didn't turn when the billionaire approached. He just kept walking as if stopping meant dying. His arms trembled. His whole body looked like it couldn't carry any more weight. Still, he refused to let go. "Kid," the man shouted, crouching beside him, breathless. "What happened? Where are your parents? Subscribe to the channel and stay with us for this incredible story. See you at the end." But the boy only hugged the babies tighter and spoke in a voice dry from sun and thirst. "I tried, sir. I walked all day. I just wanted them to have a chance." And then he collapsed. What the billionaire didn't know yet was that faint wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Inside the car, the air conditioning felt like a miracle, but it wasn't enough. Their little bodies were burning up. The billionaire soaked bottled water into towels, trying to cool the babies. Down. The older boy, maybe 10 or 11, opened his eyes for a moment, and right then the man saw it. This wasn't just a child. This was someone who had already survived a kind of hell that money couldn't erase. "You got a name?" the man asked, driving with one hand and checking the rearview mirror with the other. Silence. Then the boy mumbled, almost like an apology. "Ravi." "And the babies?" the man pressed. "They're my siblings. I don't know if they're still—" But he didn't finish. He just leaned his forehead against the window, trying not to cry. Not out of weakness, but because there was no water left in him to cry. That's when the billionaire knew. They needed a hospital. Now. He grabbed his phone. No signal. Damn it! He slammed the steering wheel. And that was the moment everything started to collapse. One of the babies let out a faint sound. It wasn't crying. It was a dragging, broken gasp, like life was stuck in the child's throat. The billionaire looked at the baby's face and felt his blood freeze. The lips were turning purple. He stopped the car in the middle of the road, jumped out, opened the back door, and began doing whatever he could remember from a first aid course 20 years ago. Breathing into the tiny mouth, pressing the chest, shouting a name he didn't even know. "Stay with me, little one. Come on, stay with me, please." For a moment, everything went still. Then he heard it, a sob, a whimper, a faint cry, but real. The baby was alive. The billionaire held the child close and felt something he hadn't felt since burying his own son years ago: hope. But when he looked at Ravi, the boy had passed out again. And this time, blood was trickling from his mouth. The desert seemed endless. But inside that luxury car, for the first time, someone was coming back from hell with something more valuable than gold. Even if he didn't fully understand it yet, the billionaire knew this moment would change everything, because no amount of money in the world could explain what he was feeling now. The billionaire's name was Alan Reeve. Famous for his tech empires in Silicon Valley, for his glass and steel mansions, for never wearing the same suit twice. But now, sitting beside an unconscious boy and 3 babies on the edge of life, Alan wasn't the man on magazine covers. He was just a father who had failed, trying to save someone who might still be saved. The road stretched out like a razor's edge between life and death. Alan hit the gas, not knowing exactly where he was going. He just knew. He couldn't stop. Ravi was pale. The babies drifted between delirium and unconsciousness. The desert heat was finally dropping, but the panic kept rising. In the glove box was an old bottle of pills, a strong sedative, left there by accident. Alan used to take them in the nights after his son died, 4 years ago. A pool accident. 30 seconds of distraction. 30 seconds that ruined everything. He never told anyone he'd actually seen his son go under. He'd been on a call, arguing over a multi-million-dollar merger. He heard the splash, but ignored it. Thought it was a bird. When he looked up, it was too late. From that day forward, Alan just kept running. From the memory, from himself. New homes, new countries, new women. Nothing lasted. The money followed him, but it never reached his heart. But what Alan didn't know was this road wasn't just a road. It was the road into his own private hell. Ravi started to twitch in the back seat. His eyes trembled beneath his lids, trapped in some nightmare. And maybe it was one. Alan grabbed his hand and small bony burning up. "Stay with me, kid. Just a little longer. You're strong, right? You can make it." But Ravi didn't answer. And then, for the first time, Alan screamed, "I need help here." "Somebody, please." The echo came back. No living soul, just the hot breath of the desert. He ran back to the car, checked the phone. Still nothing. He decided to drive on instinct. He vaguely remembered a truck stop a few miles ahead. It was a long shot, but there was no other choice. As he drove, flashes of the past came back uninvited. The funeral, the wife who never looked him in the eyes again, the lawyers, the untouched, useless bank accounts, and the silence. That goddamn silence that filled everything after. But then, the baby in his arms sobbed again. It was the youngest. A girl, maybe. Her hair was dark and thin like mist. Her eyes opened for a second, then closed, as if life hadn't yet decided whether to stay. And Alan felt something new, not just guilt, urgency. In the distance, he saw a rusted tower, an old gas station almost abandoned, a flickering freezer. Next to it, a warehouse with a truck parked outside. He stopped the car, jumped out with the baby in his arms. "Somebody! For God's sake!" An old man stepped out, wearing a torn cap, and eyes that had seen more burials than births. "What's going on?" "Kids, 4 of them, they're dying in the car, call emergency, now!" The man hesitated for half a second, then ran. He grabbed a landline from inside the warehouse. Alan ran back, scooped up Ravi, then the other 2 babies, one by one. His hands shook. Sweat drenched his back. He didn't even know where he was stepping, he just knew. He couldn't let anyone else die in his arms. Inside the warehouse, they laid the children on makeshift mattresses. The old man brought water bottles and a dusty fan. Alan kept calling out names he didn't even know, trying to keep them conscious. The man called the paramedics, then came back with ice from a broken freezer. "It's going to take a while. We're far from everything." Alan already knew that, but he stayed anyway, because something in Ravi, in that moment, opened a window that had been sealed shut for years. And Alan realized something he'd never considered before. Maybe saving those children wasn't really about them. Maybe it was about saving himself. The sound of the siren finally came. A relief, but also a cruel reminder. Time was the enemy. The enemy. 2 paramedics jumped out of the ambulance, and for a second it felt like the desert itself took a breath. One of them rushed to Ravi, who was already ghostly pale. The other took the little girl from Alan's arms. They checked pulses, opened. Medical kits, hooked up oxygen. Every movement carried a kind of urgency Alan recognized. The kind of urgency that didn't guarantee anything. The kind of urgency that sometimes arrived too late. "How many hours were they exposed?" one paramedic asked, eyes locked on the child she was trying to stabilize. "I don't know," he said. He walked all day. "Jesus," she bit her lip and signaled to her partner. "The 3 babies go in the first ambulance. You ride in the second with the boy." But then Ravi had a seizure. It was quick, brutal. His body went rigid, his eyes rolled back. Alan tried to hold him, but all he could do was scream, "Help me, for God's sake!" The paramedic rushed in and injected something into Ravi's vein. He shook one last time and went still. The monitor beeped on, slow, heavy, haunting. "He's going," she murmured. "We need to move." Alan got into the ambulance with Ravi, unconscious in his arms. The vehicle sped off, cutting through the desert with the wail of its siren and a trail of dust behind it. But what Alan didn't know yet was what awaited him at the hospital wasn't just a diagnosis. It was a mirror. The nearest hospital was a modest facility. Nothing like the polished medical centers in Los Angeles. But in that moment to Alan, it looked like a sanctuary. Ravi was taken straight to the pediatric emergency unit. The babies had already arrived and were being rehydrated, but their condition was still critical. "Are you their legal guardian?" A nurse asked. Alan hesitated. He wanted to say yes, but he wasn't. He didn't even know their last name. "No, I just found them in the desert." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you Alan Reeve?" He nodded. "I've heard of you. You're the one who lost a child, drowned, right?" The question hit like a knife without anesthetic. Alan swallowed hard. She noticed. "I'm sorry, that was insensitive." But it was too late. The memory had already returned. The blue pool, the still water, the phone ringing through the car, speaker, the small body floating, the scream of his wife, the ambulance that didn't get there in time. Hours passed. A doctor finally appeared. The 3 babies are stable, dehydrated, some minor burns, but they'll recover. Alan exhaled, as if finally allowed to exist again. And the boy? The doctor paused 1 second too long. He went into systemic collapse, extreme dehydration, physical exhaustion. But there's something else. Alan leaned forward. He has signs of older abdominal trauma, likely from previous abuse, possibly internal damage. You mean he was beaten? Repeatedly. And there are rope marks on his wrists. It's very serious. And then the police arrived. 2 officers stepped up to the front desk. Alan saw them before they even asked for him. One of them looked straight at him. "Alan Reeve, that's me. Can you come with us to the triage room?" "Sure." "What's this about?" "We found a body 30 miles from where you say. You found the children. A woman, deceased for at least 2 days. We believe she may have been their mother." Alan felt his stomach turn. "She was murdered?" "We don't know yet. But there were signs of a struggle, and in her clothing we found a note." The officer pulled out a plastic evidence bag. Inside, a crumpled sheet of paper, stained by blood and sun. Alan recognized the handwriting. It was Ravi's. "If someone finds this, please take care of them. I'll try, but I can't promise I'll make it back." Alan sat down, weak. That boy had carried 3 babies, buried his mother, and written a goodbye. And still, he kept walking. But in that moment, Alan understood. Ravi wasn't running from pain. He was walking toward the only thing left that mattered, a chance. And now, that chance was in Alan's hands. Alan left the triage room with Ravi's letter, still in hand. The shaky handwriting, the bloodstain, the way the words were chosen, it pierced him like a confession that somehow was also his own. Across the hall, the 3 babies slept in makeshift incubators, connected to monitors, wrapped in thin blankets. The smallest one still trembled. A nurse gently replaced an IV bag with the care of someone who knows. The exact value of every milliliter of life. Alan approached but didn't touch. He was afraid to break what little remained. "Are they safe now?" he asked quietly. The nurse looked at him with a mix of compassion and exhaustion. "For now, yes, but this is just the beginning." "What do you mean?" "They have no documents, no full names, no idea where they're from. If we don't identify a next of kin, they'll go into the system." "You mean foster care?" She hesitated. "A shelter, child services, which in the US unfortunately doesn't always mean care." Alan felt a knot in his throat. "They just survived the desert. They can't end up in another kind of hell." "You're not a relative, Mr. Reeve. Legally you have no say in what happens to them." But what he didn't know yet was the system's rules could be crueler than the desert. The next day, a social worker arrived. Cheap suit, leather briefcase, eyes trained for handling tragedy like paperwork. Alan greeted him with tension. "My name is Thomas Blake. I work with minors in vulnerable situations. I'm here to gather information and assess the children's condition. They're not numbers, but they are cases." Alan clenched his fists. "What if I want to take them? All 4? That's not simple. There are requirements. Procedures, psychological evaluations, background checks, emotional stability. I'm a billionaire. And with all due respect, sir, that doesn't prove anything." The answer hit like a slap. Because it was true. Alan knew nothing about raising children. All he knew was how to lose one. Ravi was still unconscious, under constant observation. The doctor said his body was fighting with everything it had, but his spirit, that seemed stuck somewhere between abandonment and survival. Alan visited him every day, sat by his side, told stories he'd never said out loud before. My son's name was Theo. He was 3, had a crooked smile, loved splashing water in my face and calling himself a water ninja. He paused. I was on a call, a Chinese investor, closing a $2 billion deal. I didn't hear the splash. When I looked up, he wasn't fighting anymore, just floating. His voice cracked. Alan took a deep breath. They said it wasn't my fault, that it only takes seconds, but it never went away, it never will. He touched Ravi's hand. But maybe, if I can take care of you and your siblings, maybe Theo didn't die for nothing. And then Ravi squeezed his fingers. The boy woke up hours later. His eyes were dry but filled with pain and a fierce resistance. Where are they? He asked first. They're alive, they're safe. Ravi tried to sit up. Alan gently stopped him. You need rest. I can't. They need me. And they'll have you, I swear. Ravi stared at him. You're just another rich guy feeling guilty. Alan swallowed hard. Maybe I am, but I want to be more than that. The silence between them was thick, until Ravi asked, if I walk out. Right now, no one will stop me. I will. Why? Alan looked him in the eyes. Because I lost a son. And if you walk out that doors, it'll feel like I lost another. The next morning, Thomas Blake returned. We contacted a shelter in Fresno. They have room for the babies. The boy, if stable, can be transferred as well. Alan stood up. I want custody of them. Thomas sighed. You'll need to prove you can handle it, that you're emotionally fit, that this isn't just guilt or impulse. Then test me, investigate me, dig into everything I've ever done. What if the judge says no? Then I'll fight until there's nothing left in me. Thomas studied him for a long moment. Are you ready for what comes with these kids? Because this isn't charity. It's pain, trauma, grief. Alan nodded. I don't want to save anyone. I just want to walk with them, even if it's hard. And for the first time, Thomas Blake believed him. Ravi was able to stand now. His legs were still shaky, his gaze still distant. But he was awake. And for the first time, the ground beneath him didn't burn. Alan stood across the room, holding a breakfast tray no one had asked for. He didn't know how to approach. Something had shifted since their talk the night before. The boy didn't trust, didn't hate. He just waited, like someone who's lost so many times that he's learned to brace for the next goodbye. I brought food, Alan said, holding out the tray. Did they eat already? Yes, all 3. They're getting stronger. Ravi took the tray and set it on his lap, but didn't eat. He stared at the wall for a few seconds. Did they cry? Yes. This morning, they woke up crying and asking for something. Maybe their mom. Silence dropped like a stone. She died because of us. Ravi's voice was rough but steady. We ran. He came home drunk one night and tried to take the youngest. Mom screamed. He shoved her into the wall. She bled a lot. I ran. With the babies. She stayed. I should have stayed too. Alan felt his throat tighten. You're not to blame. You did the impossible. You saved 3 lives. Ravi finally looked at him. And who's going to save mine? But what Alan didn't know yet was, that question would haunt him for days. Outside, things were escalating. The media had picked up the story. Desert Boys, the headlines read. The billionaire and the 4 orphans, the news sites shouted. Paparazzi began camping outside. The hospital. Alan was called into administration. The hospital director met him with a folder in her hand and exhaustion in her eyes. Mr. Reeve, we're getting calls from the press, prosecutors, even politicians. This hospital isn't equipped for this kind of attention. What does that mean? It means we have to transfer the children to a public facility, one that handles minors under state custody. You're moving them out? It's not optional, there's already a court order. Alan stood up immediately. They're not cargo. You can't just move them like boxes. And you're not their legal guardian, Mr. Reeve. You have no authority in this matter. The news hit Ravi like a bomb. They're taking my siblings. They're trying to. Are you promised? He spit the words like knives. I know. You lied too. No. and I'm not going to let them take you." Ravi turned away, eyes burning with a childhood rage that wasn't born in him. It was forced into him. Everyone says that, then they disappear. Or worse, they hurt you. Alan dropped to his knees and tried to touch his hand, but Ravi pulled back. "You're not my dad. Don't pretend to be. Then let me be someone who doesn't run when things get hard. Then stay, because it's going to get worse," and it did. The next morning, 2 police cars arrived. Officers with files, nervous nurses. Alan was in the waiting room when he saw the commotion. He sprinted down the hall toward Ravi's room, but the bed was empty. "Where is he?" A staff member pointed toward the emergency exit. Alan ran down the stairs, 2 at a time. He found Ravi behind the hospital, clutching the 3 babies, trying to open a locked gate. "Ravi, stop!" the boy screamed without turning. "I'm not going back to a shelter. They hurt you there." Alan froze, breathed. Let the pain swallow. The anger. "Please, just look at me." Ravi turned his head. He was crying without tears, like someone already emptied from the inside. "I won't let anyone hurt you. Not them, not the system, not me. Promise? I promise. Even if I scream at you? Even if you hate me? Even if I want to disappear? Especially then." Ravi dropped the babies and fell to his knees. Alan ran over and wrapped his arms around all 4 of them, as if holding an entire world together. The officers found them like that, and for the first time, they hesitated. Back in the pediatric wing, one of the officers approached Alan. "The judge wants to see you in Fresno tomorrow. Is he going to take them from me?" "He wants to hear your side." Alan glanced at Ravi, now asleep beside his siblings. "Then he'll hear everything." And deep down, Alan knew. This wasn't just a hearing. It was his chance to rewrite his story. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like this video if the story moved you. The courtroom in Fresno was far too cold for a place where lives would be decided. Alan entered with Thomas Blake beside him, now more ally than agent of the system. The judge, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and an unshaven face, flipped through papers with calculated impatience. To him, this was just another case. Just another number in a pile of unresolved emergencies, but not to Alan. This was his life. His chance not only to redeem what he failed to do for Theo, but to reclaim everything he'd buried since. His soul, his ability to love, his humanity. "Mr. Reeve," the judge began, "we've received your informal petition to assume temporary custody of 4 minors found in extreme distress. Do you confirm this intention?" "I do, Your Honor. Even though you're not a relative, even with no prior record of foster care or social involvement." "Yes," the judge sighed. "Why now, Mr. Reeve? Why these children? From what we've seen, you've spent the last few years on yachts and boardrooms. No history of charity, adoption, or caregiving." Alan took a deep breath and spoke. "Because I failed the only son I ever had. Because I was there, and he still died. Because I spent 4 years trying to feel nothing. But when I saw that boy carrying 3 babies through the middle of the desert, something inside me broke, and for the first time in a long time, I wanted to save someone who could still be saved." The judge frowned. "That's not how the system works. And maybe that's exactly why the system fails so often." But what Alan didn't know yet was that answer would come at a cost. As he walked out of the courtroom, Alan got the call. The voice on the other end was shaking. "Mr. Reeve, we're so sorry. One of the babies and the middle boy went into cardiac arrest. We managed to revive him, but his condition is critical." The world stopped. Alan dropped his phone, ran to his car, drove like a madman, barely saw the traffic lights, the other cars, the honking horns. He reached the hospital with burning eyes and a chest already bracing for pain. In the ICU, Ravi stood pressed to the glass, staring in. He didn't cry, but he trembled. Alan came up beside him. "Is he going to die?" Ravi asked without looking away. "I don't know. You promised, and I'm still promising. Then make him stay." Alan wanted to say he couldn't, that sometimes even with all the love in the world, life takes who it wants, but he didn't say it, because in that moment, Ravi didn't need truth. He needed faith. That night, Alan didn't leave the hospital. He sat beside the baby's bed, placed a hand on the small chest wrapped in wires and tubes. He told stories he made up on the spot. He talked about the sky, about dogs, about the places he wanted to show them. "If you stay, I promise you'll see snow, you'll step in it, you'll eat pizza in New York, you'll see the ocean, and the real one, not the desert. You'll have your own room, with your name on a drawer." But the baby didn't move. Hours later, Ravi appeared at the door. In his hands, a small rusted chain. It was our mum's. She said it protected us. Alan reached out, took the chain, placed it on the baby's chest. "Then protect him now, please." The next morning, the baby went into cardiac arrest again. The nurses moved fast. Adrenaline, chest compressions. Alan was pushed out of the room. He stood outside, praying without knowing how to pray. The doctor walked out. "He's stable, but at any moment that could change." And that's when Alan finally broke. He walked out of the hospital alone, got in his car, drove aimlessly, stopped in the middle of a dusty back road, got out, fell to his knees in the dirt, and screamed. He screamed everything he hadn't screamed at his son's funeral. He screamed Theo's name, he screamed why, until his throat bled, and at the end he whispered, "If someone has to go, take me instead." But there was no answer, only the dry desert wind, like an ancient echo. Later, back at the hospital, Alan entered the room where the other two babies slept. They were resting. So was Ravi. The boy was in a chair holding a makeshift toy made of gauze and medical tape. Alan sat beside him. They stayed in silence for a long time, until Ravi asked, "If he dies, will you leave too?" Alan took a moment to answer, "No, I'll stay, until the end, of all of us." And in that moment, something in Ravi gave way. He rested his head on Alan's shoulder and stayed there. The room was dim. The ICU lights blinked like tired fireflies. Alan stayed there, still as a statue beside the tiny bed. The baby slept in uneven turns. Ravi's head was still on his shoulder, but something was different now. The weight wasn't just physical, it was trust. The next morning, something changed. The frailest baby, the same one who nearly slipped away twice, opened his eyes. Really opened them. The monitor stabilized. A nurse rushed out, called the doctors. Everyone confirmed it. He was coming back. Alan laughed through tears. He touched the tiny hand and felt warmth. The baby squeezed back, as if to say, "I'm still here." But what Alan didn't know yet was the real challenge would begin outside the hospital. Days later, all 4 siblings were medically stable. The hospital had become a temporary home. Alan slept on the visitor's couch, brought clothes, toys. He learned to make bottles, clean up vomit without flinching, and decode the many types of crying. And he learned something harder. How to listen. Ravi was still all resistance, but slowly started to open up. He used to hit us when Mum was gone, said we were punishment, that only the strong survive. Did you believe that? Back then, yeah. And now? Now I think maybe we're a miracle. Alan smiled. You are. And you. I'm still learning how not to be the man I was. You're not. He would have walked away. One grey afternoon, Alan had a visitor. His ex-wife, Grace. He hadn't seen her in 2 years. She arrived quietly, her hair tied back, eyes lined with time. I read about the story in the papers. I needed to see it for myself. She stepped into the room where the children were resting, paused in front of Ravi. He looked at her with curiosity, then went back to his drawing. They're beautiful, she said. They're survivors, Alan replied. Grace sat beside him. You've changed, Alan. Or maybe I just remembered who I was before I forgot everything. She smiled softly, but there was pain behind it. Do you think you can do this? Raise 4 children who aren't yours, who carry trauma, fear, who may never fully trust you? I don't know, but I want to try. Not out of guilt, out of choice. Grace nodded. That's what I've needed to hear. For years. That night. As Ravi drew in the corner, Alan watched in silence. The boy was sketching houses, small ones in neat rows, and in the middle a larger one with 4 windows and a blue door. Is that ours? Yeah. And do you live in it? Maybe. I'm still deciding. Alan came closer. Can I help paint? Ravi thought for a moment, then handed him a blue pencil. Alan began coloring the door slowly, and with that simple act, something inside him opened too, a door Theo never got the chance to walk through. The next day, Thomas Blake returned. He had paperwork in hand. His face was calm, neutral. Good news. The judge approved temporary guardianship. You'll have 6 months to prove emotional and structural fitness. After that, you can apply for permanent custody. Alan's knees buckled. He sat down. It's real, but it's only the beginning. These 6 months will be monitored. Psychologists, unannounced visits, evaluations of the kids. I'll do it all, Thomas smiled. If you made it through the desert with them, I think you can handle this. When Thomas left, Alan turned to Ravi and said, the judge said yes, for now. Ravi didn't celebrate. He just replied, okay, but I'll only call it home, and when there's a blue door. Alan laughed. Deal. Later that night, after putting the babies to sleep, Alan sank into the armchair, exhausted. Ravi approached, holding the same drawing. I finished it. Alan took the paper. The house now had a garden, a starry sky, 3 trees, and a sign. On the door that read, The Reeve Family. You know that means you're part of it too, right? I know, just don't say it yet. Wait until I'm sure you're really staying. Alan didn't push. He knew how much it cost a broken child to trust, but in that moment, it was enough, because for the first time neither of them was alone. 2 months had passed since the judge's decision. The sun no longer burned the way it used to. The days had settled into a routine, but a different kind of routine. One made of pauses, quiet discoveries, tiny steps forward, the kind of routine that heals. Alan bought a house outside Los Angeles, away from the noise, surrounded by trees and silence. It wasn't a mansion, it was simple, but it had a backyard and a blue door, just like Ravi drew. The first night, no one spoke much. Ravi didn't want to sleep in his room. He pulled a mattress next to the baby's crib. I don't want them to wake up without me. Alan respected that. He lay down in the hallway, just listening. The next morning, Ravi appeared in the kitchen, deep circles under his eyes, but something new on his face. Relief. They slept through the night. You should sleep too. I don't know how. We'll learn. But what Alan didn't know yet was the real rebuilding would begin with the smallest gestures. Alan hired a child therapist, Evelyn. She had grey hair, a firm voice, and kind eyes. At first, Ravi refused to talk, just stared at the floor. Evelyn didn't push. She sat with him, drew pictures, talked about the weather, told ridiculous stories about astronaut cats, until one day Ravi asked, "What happens if I tell you everything? And you think I deserved what happened to me?" Evelyn didn't hesitate. "Then I fail you. But you still win, because you were brave enough to say it." That's when Ravi started to open up. He talked about the first beating, about his mum being hit in silence, about the night he ran, carrying his siblings, and never looked back. Because if he had, he wouldn't have had the strength to keep going. And for the first time, Alan didn't try to fix anything. He just held the boy's hand and listened. The babies started crawling, each on their own timeline, almost secretly. Like they knew silence was still the safest language, Alan gave them temporary names: Light, Strong, and Shadow. Names that reflected how they came into his life. One night, Ravi asked, "What if I don't want them called that? Forever? Then you choose their names. You're their big brother." Ravi thought about it for days, then came to Alan with a folded piece of paper: Lucas, Hope, and Miguel. "Can I ask why?" "Lucas was a friend who helped me in school. Hope, because Mum always said hope is the last blanket on a cold night. And Miguel was the name she wanted for the next baby, if it was a boy." Alan simply nodded. Then welcome, Lucas, Hope, and Miguel. The new routine included doctors, a specialized daycare, sessions with social workers, and monthly evaluations. Evelyn said Ravi's progress was remarkable, but slow. Exactly as it should be. "He still wakes up screaming sometimes," Alan told her. "What do you do?" "I sit by his bed and wait for him to remember where he is. That's what being a father is. A father is." Alan had never considered himself a father since Theo, but now, with 4 children under his care, something inside him was changing. It wasn't about a title. It was about showing up. One Saturday, Alan took them all to a park. It was the baby's first time outdoors since the hospital. Ravi held the three of them with the precision of a soldier, but then Alan saw something. Ravi was smiling. For real. No mask, no fear. They liked the grass. Did you like it when you were little? I don't remember. Want to? Make new memories then. Ravi stayed quiet, then nodded, and dropped into the grass with his siblings, laughing, spinning, stretching his arms. Alan watched with teary eyes, as if witnessing a soul being reborn. That night, Ravi brought Alan a piece of paper, a short scribbled text. Is this for me to read? Yeah, I wrote it for school. Alan read it out loud. My house has a blue door, my brothers have names now, and I have a room even if I still sleep on the floor sometimes. The man who lives with us lost a son, but he found 4, and we found him too. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it's scary. But when there's a blanket and silence, we feel like we won't need to run anymore. Alan couldn't finish reading aloud. Ravi looked at him, calm. You're really here now, aren't you? I am. And in that exchange, everything changed. It was no longer about guilt or pity. It was about belonging. It was the day of the final hearing, the one that would decide if Alan could legally become the guardian of Ravi, Lucas, Hope, and Miguel. Nearly 6 months had passed since the day he found them in the desert, and despite the time, Alan still carried the same fear, the fear of not being enough. In the courthouse waiting room, Ravi sat beside him, wearing a light blue shirt, holding Hope's tiny hand. Lucas slept in the lap of a volunteer. Miguel watched, the ceiling lights with wide, curious eyes. Evelyn, the therapist, was there too, ready to testify for Alan. You nervous? Alan asked. More for you than for me. Alan gave a tense laugh. For me? Because if they say no, you'll go back to being just you again. And you think I'd survive that? Ravi met his eyes. No. But what Alan didn't know yet was, the real judgment in that courtroom wouldn't come from the judge. The hearing began at 9 a.m. It was the same judge from the temporary decision, but this time he was more focused. Looking for truths between the lines, the prosecution raised concerns: Alan's emotional stability, his lack of parenting history, whether his home was fit for children with severe trauma. They argued that money doesn't build bonds, and that so noble gesture doesn't prove fatherhood. Alan listened in silence, his heart racing. Thomas Blake spoke first in Alan's defense. He cited every report, every clinical improvement in the babies, every emotional breakthrough Ravi had made. He said that in 20 years of child welfare work, he'd never seen a transformation this real, this fast. Then Evelyn was called. I'm not here as Mr. Reeves' therapist, she said. I'm here as a witness to something rare. A broken man who found healing through care. He didn't adopt these children out of charity. He let himself be adopted by them. The judge nodded. The room was silent. Then he asked something unexpected. I'd like to hear from Ravi. The boy's eyes widened. Alan stood, but Ravi was already on his feet. It's okay, I'll speak. He looked small standing before the judge, but there was strength in his stance. They said he's just a rich guy trying to fix something. But he didn't fix me, he just stayed. When I screamed, he stayed. When I tried to run, he stayed. When I told him he wasn't my dad, he just said he'd be there anyway. And how do you feel about him now? The judge asked gently. Ravi took a deep breath. The room was completely still. I feel like if I ever had a dad, it was supposed to be him. The judge nodded slowly. Is there anything else you want to say? Yeah. I wrote something, but I don't want to read it. I just want to say this now. I want him to be my real dad. I want us to stop living like everything's temporary. Alan was crying, unashamed. Ravi returned to his seat, sat beside him and whispered, now it's up to him. The judge paused the session for 15 minutes. When he returned, he held the ruling in his hands. The room fell quiet. Alan held his breath. After reviewing all reports, testimonies, the children's progress, and the personal request from minor Ravi S., I hereby grant Mr. Alan Reeve full legal guardianship of the 4 minors. with all legal rights and parental responsibilities. It was like the heir returned to the world. Ravi turned to Alan with a small smile, like someone testing if this moment was real. Alan pulled him into a hug. They both cried. Evelyn smiled with her eyes. Even Miguel made a sound that felt like laughter. Outside, the courthouse, the sky was clear. The sun didn't burn. It was as if, for a moment, the world understood what real justice meant. "So now we're really a family?" Ravi asked. "Now and forever. Even if I mess up? Even if it's hard, even if it hurts? Then, can I call you Dad?" Alan could barely speak. "Yes. And can I call you my son?" Ravi nodded. "You can." And there, on the sidewalk, surrounded by strangers, they hugged like two people who had just found home inside each other. Months after the hearing, the Blue Door house had become more than a shelter. It was a home, still with rough nights, still with nightmares, still with midnight cries, but also with loud, clumsy laughter, crayon drawings on the fridge, toys all over the floor, tiny witnesses of newly claimed freedom. The living room had pencil marks on the wall. The kitchen smelled of burnt pancakes. The bedrooms had mismatched blankets chosen by each child. Alan had learned patience, and Ravi had learned how to let go, slowly. Like a wounded bird that, once it realized no one wanted to cage it anymore, finally began to rest. On the first night of winter, Alan found Ravi awake on the porch, staring at the stars. "Can't sleep?" "It's not that." "Then what?" "I think I'm not afraid tonight." Alan sat beside him, pulling a blanket over their shoulders. "That's good. It's weird I spent so long running, waiting for something bad to happen. Now that it's calm, my body doesn't know what to do." "Then teach it. Show it. There's life after pain." Ravi nodded. "I'm trying." Lucas started to speak. His first words wobbly but filled with joy that lit up the whole house. Hope learned to point at things and name them with babbling sounds. Miguel laughed like he'd discovered magic. Alan, who once thought he had forgotten how to love, now knew the meaning of every night sound, every loaded silence, every tiny step that marked a giant leap. Ravi had become a true big brother. He held, scolded, taught. Sometimes he got tired. Sometimes he cried quietly, but he always came back. One afternoon, Evelyn watched him playing with his siblings and said to Alan, "He's letting himself be a kid." After all that time being forced to be an adult, is that a good thing? It's rare and it's priceless. Alan looked on, Ravi lying on the floor, pretending to be a monster, while the babies attacked him with pillows. He screamed, laughed, gave in. And in that joyful chaos, Alan saw Theo, not the still body in the pool, but the light spirit he had always imagined running through the house. For a moment, something inside him healed. Ravi's birthday came. For the first time in his life, he had a party. Not a fancy one, but a backyard with balloons, a cake with uneven frosting and a handmade banner that read, "Happy New Life." Alan called him to the center of the yard and handed him a small box. Ravi opened it carefully. Inside was a simple keychain, a small drawing of a blue door. "Is it the key to the house?" he asked. "It is, but it's more than that. It's the key to anything you want to open from now on." Ravi held it, as if it were fragile, then looked up at Alan. "I'll never forget the desert, or Mom, or the bad things. You don't have to. What we survive becomes part of who we are too. But now I have another part too, right?" "You do. A whole part. A part that's alive." And then Ravi threw himself into Alan's arms. Not like someone saying thank you, but like someone who finally belongs. At the end of the afternoon, after the cake, the laughter, and a messy game of hide-and-seek, Ravi walked over to the table, grabbed a notebook and started writing. Alan, curious, watched from a distance. When the boy finished, he brought the folded pages. "I want you to read it when you're alone." Alan read it that night. It was a letter. "Dad, today I understand that you didn't come to save us. You came to be saved too. The pain you carried was the same size as mine. Only yours came with money, planes, and silence. Mine came with hunger, screams, and fear. Now we have toy sounds, the smell of food, and a name on the gate. I never thought I'd say this, but I have a dad. and you have kids, and together we have a home. I love you. Ravi. Alan closed his eyes. His chest filled with breath that wasn't heavy anymore. This time it was lightness, love, home. In the final scene of this story, not an ending but a new beginning, we see the house at night. The blue door is closed. Soft, golden light shines from the windows. Muffled giggles echo, tiny footsteps patter across the floor, and with it the quiet truth. Some families aren't born from blood. They're born from pain that chose to love anyway. Thank you for making it this far, but don't leave just yet. There's another powerful story waiting for you on the screen. Click, subscribe to the channel, and share this message. I'll see you there.